Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Scafidio, editor of Prevue, and I'll be your moderator for the next hour. I am thrilled to welcome three event powerhouses to our production. Kate Brack, VP of Design and Strategy for Haute, Diane Devitt, CEO, Diane Devitt LLC, and Tahira Endian, Head of Program for IMEX. Many thanks to our sponsors, Experience Scottsdale, Lansdowne Resort, Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, and Norwegian Cruise Line. As always, we will be recording this session and you'll receive a link via email, so don't worry if you miss something. And with all Prevue webinars, you will receive CEUs from the Events Industry Council. Please use the Zoom chat and let's have conversations. Keep it lively, ask questions, make a joke, whatever you'd like to do with that. And do check your console because we specially created a guide with great ideas for your events. And I think you'll get something out of that. So it is on the console now. And I'm going to stop there and turn it over to the panelists to say a quick hello. And then we will do a poll because we'd like to see who's in the room and get started. So why don't you kick it off, Kate? Welcome.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I'm so thrilled to be here today. So as Barbara said, I am Kate Brack. I'm VP of Design and Strategy at Hot Agency. We're based out of Austin, Texas, and I am part of the remote office here in Los Angeles. And again, just really honored to be here and be a part of this important discussion with all of my fabulous panelists that are here to join with us.
And Diane.
Hi, everyone. Diane Devitt. Thank you, Barbara, and Prevue. The same as what Kate said. I'm Diane Devitt. I'm a speaker, producer, educator. I've dabbled in events throughout my nearly 35 years and am very happy to be here to share some insights and wisdom with the other panelists. Thank you.
And we have Tahira in the great chair.
Great storytelling chair. So definitely here to share some stories today. So thank you. So I just learned something this morning, Barbara, when I was part of a creativity conference, which is a good question that I'd love to throw into the chat if we can, is not how are you doing, but how are you arriving today? So are you distracted? Are you focused? Are you ready to learn? How are you arriving today? So if people want to answer that, we'd love to see that too.
I just put it in there and I will be reading off some of the answers. And we've got, oh yeah, fabulous chair. We already got a compliment. We've got people from all over the country. I guess that always happens, right? San Diego to Boston. People are open and hopeful, ready to learn what's new, ready to obtain knowledge. Let's see, busy preparing for summer. Wow, very organized. Needing to change my focus. That's interesting. I mean, I hope we can help with that. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I wish you luck. Yeah, just great. Lots of eager, engaged learners on the phone. So we're going to run a poll, Jennifer, if you could. We've got Jennifer and Gary behind the scenes. And we'd like to know a little bit about your experience level. So how many years have you been designing event experiences? We're still calculating. It looks like we've got a very experienced group on the phone, or on the webinar, which is just awesome. And it looks like we've got the vast majority with 10 plus years of experience, and almost the whole group 6 and up. So terrific. We've got an experienced crowd because you're talking to some very experienced event experts here. So we've had a couple of discussions before this event because we wanted to make sure that we were really touching on everything that's new. And what we also realized is that we can be talking about trends, and we're definitely going to be doing that today, but there are fundamentals that we're going to share that are always there and are critical to your events. So you're going to be getting a little bit of both. But why don't we start with what we all identified was like here and now, especially with Google XI just happening. Was it last week in New York? And the, we want to have a little discussion about how inclusivity has changed, has evolved, and belonging and neurodiversity are the words, a critical factor in planning your events. And we actually have Kate, who was behind a lot of the efforts at Google XI, who's going to talk a little bit about that. So why don't you kick it off?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. Just a little bit of this, backstory for Google XI. Our agency was brought in July of last year, along with Storycraft Lab. And in that partnership, Storycraft Lab ran some amazing focus groups. We deep dived into every avenue of inclusion and neurodiversity that we could in order to bring XI Days to life with our fantastic team at Google, headed by Megan Henschel. So it was extremely successful. We are still collecting a lot of data post-event and are so excited to share that off. I know Megan and team will be sharing a lot of that back to the community from a lot of the learnings that we did. But the real motivation behind this obviously was proof of concept, right? We've sat in the seat so much of ideating as event professionals and thinking for our attendees, right? What they're going to feel, what they're going to think, and not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but we really did bring that neuro-inclusive community in. Megan and her team had for the previous 2 years created the new project, which we can share in the chat later, which is a great downloadable playbook for all event professionals to really has such great information in there on how you can start focusing and putting all of your events through the lens of neuro-inclusion. But I will, jump a little bit to the format and how we as a creative agency were really in partnership in creating the format for XI Days. So we really went into it with, let's, go in with the traditional format, right? We're going to do programming, we're going to have speakers, we're going to have panelists ask questions, and then headed into day 2 with that really non-traditional format, which we've all heard the buzzword for, I think, the past 2 years now, the unconference platform. And with that, we really flipped it as a kind of choose your own adventure platform in which speakers were scheduled for 15-minute segments throughout the day. And attendees were able to choose when they wanted to attend based on preference and their experience profiles, how they wanted to approach the space and to approach the content. And then surrounding that were several key and essential partners within the neurodiverse space, where we kind of called it the museum, kind of put it as or marketed it as a museum experience. So you could kind of go and explore and take in content, again, at your own pace. And this also allowed very much for people to step away and also have their day, right? It was not all consuming in terms of their attention, because as all of us, right, we're professionals. And that is something that we lose when we tend to go to these big conferences. We think, oh my gosh, I've got to put all my work on pause and try and focus in on this information, but we're all running businesses on some level and involved with our teams and our projects. So that format really allowed for just this natural pathway for all of our attendees to take a break, to have a moment to return a phone call, to jump on a Zoom meeting with their teams, and then come back in and have those really profound moments. And again, I think the big thing that came out of that was that real 15-minute format, small group, choose your own adventure pathway. So
Like
that was really kind of the key, again, proof of concept that we were looking for XI Days. And as the data is coming out from all of the responses from our attendees, it seems that it was really very successful. So it's a little snippet into the XI Days project.
Yeah, so one of the attendees is asking, what did you measure? Like, how are you measuring the results of what you just described?
Sure. So what we partnered with Meeting Pulse, which is an event app, and in partnership with Storycraft Lab as well, we created what are called experience profiles. And that was something that pre-event we had and encouraged all attendees to fill out and figure out what their profile was. So that preferential profile then became your guide, and the guidebook and playbook for how you navigated day one within the traditional format concept, and then navigated day two in terms of that non-traditional format. And through that, we had kiosks for day two, where you were then able to give instant feedback. And we made it very approachable. It was very, like we all like to do, just do a heart. It was scaled in emojis versus now I have to fill out a post, form. It had a lot of critical thinking in it or whatever. It was very more of the moment, top of mind. These are the emotions. This is, I'm connecting or I'm not connecting. And as we're starting to gather that based off of the experience profiles that were scheduled for pre-event, and as our guide, we're now taking all of that and didacting it down into what worked, what didn't work, to kind of give back those key learnings at the end of it. So that was the measuring tool in which we used. And a lot of the thinking around that, and we had so many discussions on that topic in particular, but it is related back to our phone, right? And our devices. What is that easy thing that we do all day long? We give a heart to someone's comment. We react with emojis across all social media platforms. So we already know that language. And it really just felt like the key tool for us to get that immediate feedback versus someone bypassing the feedback because it was too arduous or it wasn't approachable.
Right. That sounds so interesting. I definitely have that. Wish I was there, all last week.
You have some FOMO? No.
That was the part to that. Tahira, I would love to talk to you about the topic of neuro.
Yes.
And because, you are in a master's program right now, and you have when we were practicing for this webinar, and I asked to hear about this, she just grabbed a big stack of textbooks to show me that, yes, indeed, I am learning a lot about this. So why don't you?
I don't have that big stack of textbooks right now, but yeah, so I am almost finished, actually 2 projects away from finishing a master's in creativity and change leadership, which has been, just so enlightening. So it took all of the things that we already knew and a lot of things that, we were already talking about, and has just really deepened that knowledge, which has been really great. And I think what you'll probably find, Kate, and what I certainly found from, I've just finished 2 sets of being on site for 2 meetings over the last 2 weeks, and 3, including the one that I spoke at. But I'm not usually surprised by what comes back in the evaluations, because we know when we're designing what our limitations are. So what the audience doesn't know is what the constraints are. So whether that's, it's going to be a reception food versus a sit down dinner that they didn't like, or that the rooms were very crowded because people couldn't select ahead of time, or, so there's things that happen that, you're going to get judged on, that, that we already know, because we've already designed for the things that we can control. And then we get the things that we don't always get to make the decisions on. And one of those things really is about inclusion, so I always think about, how is someone's brain arriving? And sometimes people think that just sounds ridiculous, but I'm like, well, we all have them. And not only do we all have them, we have all of these little neurotransmitters running around in them that are just part of human physiology. And when we start to understand the things that we can control, control is a bit strong of a word, but the things that we can influence, by feeding people good food, by creating lighting that is at a level that's welcoming, by, we were just hearing, one of our coworkers was telling us about her experience at XI Days, which was amazing. But one of the things that there was classical and jazz music, and there's a ton of research on why music without words is so much more effective for enhancing learning. We still so often we go into, we call it a networking reception, and then we turn the band up and you're yelling at people. That's not networking. It's annoying. So, there's so many simple things that we could be doing better at our events, just for people to be comfortable, almost no matter what kind of neurostate they're arriving in, and understanding that for some people, many people, hearing is a challenge. So just use the microphones, or movement is difficult. So when they say, okay, everybody stand up and move around the room, not everyone is able to stand up and move around the room comfortably. So there's a lot of small nuances of things that we can be doing that are going to create better experiences. And then just keep testing them. There's always going to be somebody who doesn't like what we've tested. That's part of the process. We're humans. But if we can, get it right for the majority, and that majority now including a lot of people who are much more comfortable stating that they have a neurodivergency, let's work to help them. So I think that what you're doing is fantastic.
I'm just curious, are there resources that we can be, you just brought up a few things that I hadn't heard or thought of. I mean, what resources can we tap into? I know we've done an occasional article, but I can't start, if I'm planning an event, I wish I had some guidance about things like not to say or do.
Good luck with that one.
Yeah, so IMEX has created a really great neuro-inclusive language guide. So that's available on the IMEX website. And that's a great resource. And it's an ongoing work as well. So it's, it says right at the beginning, this is not 100% right. This is a work in progress as we continue to learn. So that's an excellent resource. For a lot of the other things, there's other tools out there. But you also have to be interested in and passionate about that part of designing for events. And it's okay that not everybody is, because I'm not good at, setting up audiovisual, but other people are. I'm not great at creating, I can't make a fabulous video, but other people are. So it's about tapping into the strengths of the team as well to bring things together.
Interesting.
And I'll go ahead. I was just going to say, Barbara, I can go ahead and drop in the chat if you want me to. The new project was also the all of the research that Megan Henschel and team produced prior to XI Days. So that's another great one. It's a downloadable playbook, so it's great.
Terrific. I would love to share that with everybody.
I'm just thinking of something, Barb, if I can jump in here. Yeah. Your brain works when you're listening to other people. That's the neuroscience of it, right? But I'm going to go back, since I can, maybe about 15 years in this industry. We brought in a man called Christophe Morin, Morin, and his work was in neuromarketing, one of the first. And also, just to note it for people with research, is Robert Cialdini. He also did wrote a book called Influence, which was part of tapping into the resources, because, as Tahira is gaining in this, and I'm so happy bringing it to the fore with Kate's work. But this is where when you talk about trends, the power of the brain and controlling people is huge, is tantamount. And what industry has that except ours, with meetings and events? So moving forward, this is going to be a whole new area on behavioral control, on organizational behavior, on psychology, on anthropology, on everything. And also, I just want to also mention, because he deserves it, is Martin Van Ness. Martin wrote that book called Meeting Architecture, which was all about unraveling the thread and peeling back the onion for those of us who come from the background of, personally with me, is the psychology of theater and the psychology of people and emotion. So all of this work has been like twinkle dust, and now to see it come to fruition is exciting.
Right.
I think there's some other great, I had to go back in December at the end of, as we were trying to come out of the pandemic and reread the book I'd written, Intentional Event Design. And I was like, at the end of it, I was really, really didn't want to do that. I was like, this is going to be horrible. It's all going to have to change. And I realized, no, it's actually a really good resource that I am really proud of. And we added, I just added 8 pages of things that were related to the post-pandemic. We also have Eric DeGroot and Mike Van de Beaver, who wrote Into the Heart of Meetings. And they are just in the process of launching a new book as well, which again goes really deep into that sort of event design and meeting design space. So there's some really good resources out there. The stack of books that I shared with Barbara was all the work from my master's project, which is around belonging. And so it's like literally, I'm deep into that now. So that's my next 2 months. We'll be working on more about belonging, but it really is about how do we create spaces people want to be in and want to come back to.
Right. And
That's what an
that
event
is
is.
your job. It's not, event design is not, it's not just the logistics, at all. It's just, it's more of a science. And I think that's where we're at as this industry evolves. I just saw a note about a bibliography of the resources mentioned. So what we can do is we'll get together on email after this, put all those names and titles together, and yes, we will get it to you guys. We're listening. So I want to move into a different topic on the theme of what's old is new again. And Diane has been an expert in the area of event design going back many years, and a teacher, and we were saying has probably taught thousands of students in her
Yes.
at NYU over the years. But her expertise is in another area that she calls the theater of design. And I'd like to talk a bit about that and about the sensory part of design, that it is actually orchestrated and scientific. Like I said, it's
Yes.
not about logistics, it's about the science of it. So why don't you start?
Thank you. Well, thank you, Barbara. So as in preparing for this, I was also remembering that I don't know how many years ago, but I worked with a woman named Dr. Cindy Ackrill, who was a brain scientist. And we made a presentation on the correlation of following every step of a meeting. And Cindy then worked with me on what goes on with the brain, from registration to walking into a room with strangers, to sitting at a table with strangers, amazing stuff. And from that exercise with her, I then brought, and I said to her, well, my background is theater. So let's take what you're doing let's take the meeting, let's take what your expertise is, let's take the theater of events, and let's really start breaking this down. So it became more and more clear to me, call it whatever you like, theater of exhibits, of meetings, of conferences, of events. And how can we look at it like the big picture? So when you think about it, you have a play, you have a story to tell, you have a message to deliver. And that play is broken down into Act 1 and Act 2, and then it's broken down into subplots and little scenes and intermission. And what is the objective of it? And when you make that correlation as a planner, it adds a certain dimension to me that then brings in the whole emotional aspect we're speaking about today. Because what is the word that you learn in theater but catharsis? You learn, when I go to a play, I want to leave changed. I want something to emotionally change in me, make an impression to me. And so that really is the basis for my work in that. Yes. And I think one of the biggest things that has dawned on me in this conversation is we're speaking about a lot of big words to planners, neuroscience, neurodiversity, all these different topics. But at the end of the day, we have to remember people are people. And that sensitivity of still connecting on an emotional level, on an empathetic level, on a supportive level is critical. I was thinking about one example I did with a group many years ago, and this is about knowing your group. And I know some people are going to smile when I say this. This was a group of engineers, a beautiful event. And on the perimeter of the room, I had very upscale novelty entertainment to participate in during the dinner. Well, I'm looking and I'm seeing that no one's going up to these tables. And one of the engineers came to me and said, "Are you going to tell us when we're allowed to go up? Are you going to give me permission? Because I'm sitting with the client." And I'm thinking about the sales group that would have bombarded these people and, certainly not held back. So when you think about the diversity and really with people's brains and their behavior is really truly when we say know your group, know your attendees, these people needed permission, right? So Barbara, in my book, the What Color is Your Event book, I have a whole section on permission to play, which goes back to Plato and accelerated learning techniques and teaching people this stuff. So the bottom line is people are people and we have to have fun.
Right. Right.
Connect with them. Yeah.
Right. Fun is a
Yes.
shield for warming them up and
wearing the same color glasses as the Prevue logo. That's fun.
And Tahira painted her wall specifically for this. Let's talk a little bit about the sensory aspect of meeting of event planning.
Right. So, so it very much is. Yeah,
it is a continuing trend, right? That we need to address.
Totally continuing trend. In fact, I see it growing, and I actually personally have some more work to do in it. So you'll be hearing about that. But this is what's interesting, and this is the dichotomy with the neuroscience of it all. So everyone is familiar with the 5 senses, right? And we think that's all we have. We technically have over 30 senses and an additional 35 what they call sensibilities. So sense of fear, sense of humor, you can list your own. You all think about this, you say this constantly. But here's what I want the planners to take away. You can all envision a super highway, the ones that the traffic is going every direction, and then those figure 8s and overlap and this and that. This is how our sensory system works internally. When I just tap my fingers together in that nanosecond, 11 million messages are going through my body. So in the planning process, where the senses come in is this. There can only be one dominant sense at a time. Now, here's the example for everybody. How many of you have watched your favorite movie or film, video, seen a play, seen it 2 or 3 times? And every time you go, you say, I don't remember that costume. I didn't remember them saying that. I didn't remember this. Is because at that time, maybe your visual sense was prevalent. Maybe your auditory sense, your hearing wasn't. And so we have to remember that in planning, for example, if you play Italian music and serve French food, the French food will not taste as good as it would if you served Italian food. Right. This is it. This is what I mean by one sense dominant. So knowing your group and really knowing them. Oh, if we have a sales group, what's going to be important? Chicken or a good dance band? I say a dance band. But if it's a senior level group, knowing them, are they going to have good wine? Yes. Different background music. So this is how the senses play with the neuroscience of planning.
Well, the other thing, that is absolutely about the senses, and I saw Tahira wrote it in the chat, is food and F&B. And, that has just come so far in especially, thinking about food as an energizer and keeping people engaged and healthy and not
healthy.
off their
Yes.
habits and all of that. So who wants to talk a little bit about that? We've got some great info in the guide, the downloadable guide. But you know, what do you mentioned the food at XI to hear?
You know, I have one life-changing thing that I'm going to share with you.
Yeah.
And this is for anybody who starts their day getting up and having caffeine of any kind. So when we were just working on the education for the Psych Global Conference, we added some sessions because we had so many people coming that we needed to have, we knew we were going to have more sessions. Fantastic problem to have. And so we added a session that was called Running as Fast as We Can. And we had a working mother, we had Ken, who's gone through a very huge wellness journey. And I said, I really want somebody who can really speak intelligently about nutrition and sleep and has a health background. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm bringing my daughter who's just finishing her 5-year degree in that. So I asked the other presenters if they would be open to having my daughter present with them, and love them. They were like, hell yeah. Oop, language. But that was what they said. And so, which was amazing. But so I had her prepare a 1-page PDF of wellness tips. And the first one was about caffeine. And so what I've now learned and have put into practice in the last month is that when we wake up in the morning, we have a neurochemical called adenosine that lives in our body. And it's very, you know, it's what makes us sleep, basically. So it's very present. And when we wake up in the morning, it needs about an hour, 60 to 90 minutes to naturally dissipate. If you have caffeine in that first 60 to 90 minutes, it links up very nicely. And it's just like, hello, adenosine, I'll keep you down for a while, but it can't keep it down all day. So it lets go. And now you have that 2 or 3 p.m. in the afternoon slump. Just by changing having caffeine after 1 hour after I'm awake, I have erased an afternoon slump that I've had for 20 years.
Here, I never knew that was I never knew that was the reason. People tell you, you know, when you wake up, have a glass of water to cleanse out your. Brilliant.
Science. So if that's the only thing that I learned about wellness like this year, I'd feel good about it. But I do think, you know, it's one of the biggest things that we can control in our meetings. And every time that I go to a meeting and see coffee and donuts, I literally want to just throw myself over the table and tell people not to eat them. There's nothing, it gives us nothing. You can't have that kind of start to your day and learn anything. It's impossible because your brain doesn't get anything to feed it.
So can I say something? Can I say something on that? Because since we're talking about trends, right? I think that this is a trend that everyone can think about, is education. Now, you are never going to stop people from coffee the next morning, the morning after. You'll be tarred and feathered at your own event. However, you can put a little frame with what I was just saying on the side of the table with a big gallon of water. Says,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Maybe we're helping them learn by doing that. We actually
are.
We're helping them the afternoon of our event be on instead
of. Also, by the time people actually come down to our meeting, they've been awake for an hour. If that's the first coffee they have, they're fine. You know, so it's just, we need to think about how we're, you know, it's about care, right? So how are we caring for you? You know, how are we giving you nutritious things? How are we, I absolutely can, Carolyn, share that PDF of tips.
Listen, we've come a long way and we're going to keep growing, aren't we? But don't take my chocolate away.
Chocolate's good for you.
Ever. No matter what time of day. I don't care.
Red wine, they're good for us. So
I'm putting in the chat, I would love to hear from people about how they've made their F&B healthier to share with all.
It's also, I think, one of the things that we are really facing right now is both in life and in events, that just the cost of food has become very astronomical. But you know what? I would rather spend that money on an apple than a bag of cheesies if I'm feeding people. So we can still make good choices in those same budgets.
You know, this is the thing too. And I can throw this out to this group because we're just family, right? I remember years ago being on such a high horse about food and health. And I said, you know, what if we as an industry, think about collectively as an industry, how many people there are? What if we put pressure on things like the cattle industry? I mean, we don't realize, the point that I want to make is that planners don't realize the power they hold.
Yeah.
Whether it's over people or it's over entities. As a group, the people we manage, the things that we do, the destinations, the revenue that we affect, don't forget that.
You've got someone out there who said you're absolutely right. We are changing our hotel partners' view.
Yes.
Because, you know, they come to me and say, yeah, I'm getting, they immediately go to local, like here's what we do with locally sourced. You know, 5 years ago, they wouldn't have even brought that up. So by everyone having these expectations that are good for our our attendees, we are definitely shifting the mindsets of the hotels, and obviously they're shifting their buying and their sourcing and so forth accordingly. So without even you know, coming together and organizing, I can see that difference. We've got a lot of people, I'm just going to read a few of them, but you know, plant-based, vegan offerings. A lot of people are using the Impossible or there's that other brand of meat. You know, local sourcing. Water is a big one, you know, and that's something, you know, talk about another sign. You could have a sign by your water about how important your intake of water is. You know, I mean, we are there to educate and help and guide, you know, not just follow directions, and educate up too when we're told not to do something, or, you know, well, this is why it's important, you know.
I also don't think there's a chef in the world that thinks, man, I'd sure love to serve something processed today.
Open up that cheese, baby.
Well, another key learning that really kind of came out of this as well is in that pre-planning moment for all of us planners, right? And it was so interesting in some of our groups. We're like, how do we keep just brushing past this? And again, you know, it's so obvious, our demographic. And oftentimes in our intake forms or when working with our clients, we just have a one-liner that's like, you know, they're roughly this amount of male, amount of female, and they're roughly between the ages of 35 and 60. And it doesn't really go beyond that. And what a loss of information. So in that pre-planning moment, take your time to list everything, you know, from these key preferentials when it comes to dietary, right? The more information in the upfront and in the pre-planning that we can really learn and digest and start seeing through the lens of the entire design process of the people that are actually going to be there versus what I think, or this is the trend, we will pre-plan for you to come and you will enjoy, right? Take that breath, take that moment, take that time, because so many inspirational key things come out of that. And then you do get back in your post-event surveys and all those things, that more of a transformational moment, a transformational takeaway, and your attendees asking like, when is this happening again? What's next? Yeah, so really, really take time in that space. It's so important.
Very, very well put, and so true. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna segue, because I think this next topic really kind of ties it all together with a bow. But you know, we all have to measure the success of these events, and you know, Hote has done a lot of work around return on emotion. So can you share with the group? There might be people who are not as familiar with that and how that works with events.
100%. Yeah. So obviously the pandemic, you know, we are always like not wanting to talk about this pandemic, but we all were forced, you know, especially our industry, to reevaluate and deconstruct, and get back to to the foundation of why we're here. I think a lot of us actually had to prove in that space as well, like, why go back, right? We all spend so much time in that space so that with a lot of our clients, well, why am I going back? Why am I spending the money? And again, time and again, ROI, 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 right? And I feel like we've heard it even more for all the reasons that we know that how important ROI is to our clients. So we really used that time. We thought, let's take this time, let's really deep dive and go back to the age-old central tenement that we've all been talking about this entire time on emotions. And we all know that it's been proven time and again, like 95% of our decision making, or whether we're going to purchase something or whether we're going to participate in something, comes from that emotional response. So as with my other panelists here, we enlisted Dr. Nicole Alito and her firm so we could better understand and come up with a pre and post metrics for how we could aggregate this information. And that's where ROE, return on emotion, was born. And so how ROE, our return on emotion, is going to affect ROI so that we can actually talk to our procurement people when they're on the phone and they're like, okay, we understand, right? Versus why is the budget? Why are we not coming in here? And what is this line item, right? So some of the key findings that I'll just kind of truncate here, and we can also share out after this amazing panel with all of our information. Some of those key things that we learned that we're measuring and that just kept coming forward were that attendees really need to feel these 5 emotions and these key emotional responses. And the first one, and we call it HAM, just to have some tongue in cheek. And that is hopeful, adventurous, active, accepted, and motivated. And it's through those metrics of our pre-programming and post-event surveys that we discovered, and we kind of put together, the just basic levels of 1 to 10. How can we capture all 5 of those emotional responses, and how does it relate to the ROI from the event? And we found that score really, the sweet spot needs to be about 8.6. So not only is that giving us insight into our attendees and who's there and why they're there, right? But it then gives us some really strong language to go back to our procurement partners to show them how the two really reflect back to each other, and answers the why of why we need to do this again. Why is this annual? Why is this quarterly? Why is this, why do we have these bigger expenditures that are going to happen every other year? And it just gives us a really baseline, common language to share across both things, so that not only can we equip ourselves, but we can equip our clients with that language to go back to their up levels and to really support the reason why it's so important to have the in-person event experience and why events are so transformative.
Well put.
Yeah.
Anything from Diane or Tahira to add?
Well, I'm thinking that, first of all, I love it. I love the ROE. I'm thinking row, row, row your boat. I love it. But anyway, so I'm reminded about, gosh, I don't have the dates in my head, but about 15, 20 years ago, I think it was a major ad agency who created the concept of a love bite. And that love bite was about reaching your clients and reaching your customers through effective advertising, which isn't that what we do, everyone? We're not meetings and events. We're a communication vehicle with PR, with advertising. There we go. We look to reach people. So this love bite concept then developed into a touch point, which then we all started to use this phrase, however you use it, whatever your definition is, but it is that moment that you connect with someone, right? Not physically touching, but here we go. And Tahira, you got to jump in with this one, right? Because it's the emotional touch, right, Kate? And it's that effective point. So how do we do that? And what is this trend that we're talking about? Trends. this whole conversation to me reminds me, because I can say it. You get to a certain point in your life where you just like, you say what you want. Everything old is new again, right? So yes, we have to address the pandemic. We were isolated for 2 years. People are coming back, and we have a generation that doesn't know any different. And we have a generation that wasn't really easy to talk to in the beginning. And now we have all these people coming together. So how do we create these touch points? And my biggest thing, as I said to you before, with the permission to play and knowing your group is, and planners, get ready for this one, because it's going to be scary. You have to put your life on the line and take a risk to believe that the outcome that you know will happen, because you're working with pros like Kate and Tahira and other people, will happen. I can remember working with a major insurance company. I still have that note on my desk. You know what the note says? Next time I'll trust you all the way. And I said, and this is 20 something years ago, I said to the planner, she wants interaction. She wants engagement. This is before the word engagement was used. How can you do it? I said, we've got a name talent. I will not even tell you, fabulous name talent up there. Let's have your CEO start a conga line. I'm not asking him that. I said to myself, fine, you ask the CEO, because I knew as an event designer and planner that there would be a moment in that night, a touch point, a love bite. That would be the grab the excitement while you can. Well, the CEO was so happy to do this, thrilled. He led this freaking conga line all over the ballroom. Fabulous. And afterwards, she came up and said, thank you. So I am going to charge every single planner on this call to look into your next meeting and think about where you can take a risk to actually evoke some human reaction. And it's very scary.
Yeah, that's
We haven't, when we were talking about this, as we were still in the pandemic, we said, gosh, we're going to come back and we're going to do things so differently. And guess what? We're not doing anything very differently. Every meeting I've been to, and I've been doing live meetings since April of 2021. So we came back pretty fast. First we had a lot of protocols, but, I went to an event where everyone was sitting 6 feet apart until the coffee break, and then everyone was congregated at the coffee station. So humans are humans, right? I mean, there's things we can't take out of us. So I think that, but why aren't we taking more of those risks?
Why aren't we?
About the love bites and the touch points, and it comes back to, we have brains, and in our brain is this thing called oxytocin, and it is almost impossible to measure. And by almost impossible to measure, I just read a book called Immersion by Paul Zak, who is a researcher at Claremont University. To measure oxytocin, what they have to do is take your blood, freeze it, put it in a centrifuge, and measure it, and do the same process for before and after an experience. That's how small this neurochemical is. For anyone who has had a child, oxytocin is what floods your body, so you'll have a second child. So it's true. So,
yeah,
but it is also when we can get people to engage with each other at our event, when you have a human connection that is not an intimate in that way connection, but that is, I've had a nice conversation with you. We've had good eye contact. Maybe you're a friend and we've had a hug. Maybe we've had a warm handshake. Whatever it is that gives us that moment in time where our oxytocin levels are raised, that's going to be the thing that gives us, as planners and hoteliers and venues and service providers, better evaluations, because we feel better about the event. From a marketing perspective, it's going to make us buy the product, come back to the event again. But it's only going to happen if we allow comfortable, safe, engaging spaces for people to make connections. That is not a round of 8 or 10, by the way. That doesn't happen there. So, there's
no, but you know what? That's a good point too, Tahira. And if I could, I'm going to give a 3 quick examples of this to to get people, because I know planners have done amazing things over the years and continue to do it. But when we talk about emotions and we talk about touch points and we talk about this, we're basically talking about where in that meeting agenda, and I don't care if the agenda is a half a day or a half a month, but where can we plot these touch points that will evoke a surprise? A surprise, because it's when you surprise someone, you're emotionally engaging them, right? So let me give you 3 quick examples, different levels. CEO group, 100 of the top people, major engineering company involved in aeronautics. What they did was a part in the aeronautics industry. Very serious general session in the morning, 3 hours, talk this and this, and 99 men, 2 women. Doors of the ballroom open. What do I have on high tops outside? But in huge silver bowls, I have these little, the planes that you make out of balsa wood? Yes, in the rack. And everyone had to take one, and lunch was next. And before you know it, I'm standing on the balcony of the hotel with the CEO, and he said, look at my top people. They're all playing with their little wooden airplanes. And I said, isn't that fantastic? Because it was. So there's number 1. What's your theme? Who's your group? Take a risk on something simple as that. The other thing was, I have no budget, Diane. I can't even afford those little planes. Never mind. Well, you know what? Here's one. Say you use real badges. Turn the badges upside down. People will come and they'll think they're going to look for their name to hear it under T, and then they don't see it and they freak out. They take a step back. And then you say to them, pick any badge, go into the reception, and your job is to find that person, which means you have to talk to people. Right to you see that? So that's the second thing. The third one I'll give you is this. 7 o'clock, the event starts. I'm with 1,500 people. The CEO comes up to me and he says, so Diane, how are we going to kick this party off? I said, it is now 7:05. At 7:25, every single person in this room will be lined up to dance and fighting to get on the dance floor. He said, okay. So at 7:20, spotlights on the entrance door, and there are my 2 fabulous drag queens holding a bamboo stick, and then I blast the limbo music as they then walk through the group, go up on the dance floor where we had previously set dots. So there was a line, and at 7:25, the whole room was lining up to do the limbo. So I'm throwing different things out to you because it gets you to think of what you can do with your own circumstances.
And one of our attendees, Carolyn, said that is genius.
I can't help it, Carolyn. Thank you.
And that is what we do. And you 3 are just experts at that. I'm gonna leave it there because I think we've covered a lot of ground. And I just want to give the people a minute. If you have any questions at all, well, I've got these 3 incredible people on the phone. Please do share. Tahira, while I've got you on the call, why don't you share a little bit about what you're doing with IMEX for
that's like so fun. So yeah, so IMEX is the place where we all connect. So we all know that it is a marathon. We all know that we're now allowed to come in our comfortable shoes. That is embraced.
I saw that.
It is so great. And so we're continuing with, obviously the show, all of this, just walking around to the different booths who all, so many of them offer education. So many of them offer opportunities for those different kinds of connections. They're all looking for ways to really, embrace and be part of the community. And so they are all working pretty hard to create exceptional experiences in their booths. And then we have, of course, all the fun nighttime things that happen. And then from an educational perspective, with Frankfurt, the program will be up soon, but there is some excellent programming. And there is some programming that happens on Monday, which is exclusively corporate. So only corporate buyers in that room, and association focus, the same thing, and our agency directors forum. So those are three opportunities if you are really looking for something that is specific for you as a planner. Those are some excellent opportunities to come in for. And then once we're on the show floor, we've broken it up this year into 6 tracks. A couple of new ones being experience design and event marketing. So really taking deep dives into how we're doing those things, and a really strong business practices track. So looking at all kinds of sustainable, purposeful business that augments all of the things that we already are really great at talking about. So the people and planet. Google is going to have a great presence there, working to bring some activations. And we're adding an ideation station this year to both shows. And that's going to be a place where you can come for facilitated discussions and really contribute to some of the biggest challenges we face in our industry right now. So we hope that a lot of people will come and really get engaged in those discussions. Thanks for
Can I just say, Tahira, can you just please tell everyone what you called IMEX, because I love that.
So I've worked for 2 events now, but I've been to 15, and I have always considered IMEX the mothership.
That's right,
So
the mothership.
It is where we all come together.
It is.
So yeah.
Well, we look
Perfect.
seeing you all there. We're pretty much out of time. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you to the very engaged group on the chat, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.